I don't remember the crash. Just flashes. The taste of metal. Screaming tires. A horn. Maybe mine, maybe someone else's. Then, nothing. A deep black silence. But before the coma, before the hospital monitors and the whispered prayers, there was him. No, not my husband. Not yet. Back then, he was just the arrogant golden boy who made my life hell in college. Let's go back. We were both juniors at a small liberal arts college on the East Coast. He was the type that people automatically assumed was straight, tall, pre-med, captain of the swim team. One of those guys with a last name that sounded like Legacy, Chase Whitmore. And me? I was the out gay guy who wrote poetry and worked shifts at the campus bookstore. I had an ironic moustache for a few months. I wore scarves unironically. I was weird, and I liked that about myself. But apparently Chase didn't. He never said anything explicitly homophobic. He didn't need to. Every time I opened my mouth in seminar, there'd be that eye roll, that tight, smug smirk when I read something vulnerable in writing class. The way he'd call me bro, like it was an insult. And once, I'll never forget, he accidentally knocked my coffee out of my hand before an open mic night and said, "Oops, guess art school is hard," then winked. He was a jerk. That was the story I told myself. Easy. Simple. But then life, as it always does, turned the narrative sideways. We graduated. I moved to Portland. He went to med school in Boston. I forgot about him. Or I thought I did. Fast forward 6 years, I'm working at a small non-profit, dating a guy who ghosted me after I told him I loved him, and dealing with my mum's early-onset Alzheimer's diagnosis. Life is a pile of chaos with little moments of grace. I'm barely holding it together. One night, after visiting my mom, I'm driving home, mentally replaying a fight I had with my sister. It's raining. I miss a stop sign. A truck slams into the driver's side. I don't remember anything else. I woke up 31 days later. The first voice I heard was a woman's, nurse maybe, and then another voice, lower, familiar. Too familiar. "Hey," he said. "Hey, you're awake." My brain struggled to place the voice with the face. I blinked, everything was blurry. And then there he was, Chase fucking Whitmore, sitting next to me, in scrubs, looking tired, looking concerned. "What the hell?" I croaked, my throat dry and cracked. He smiled, actually smiled. "Nice to see your attitudes intact." I passed out again. But that was the beginning. The truth unraveled slowly, through morphine drip. And guess who was on rotation at the hospital where they brought me in? Yeah, him. Turns out Chase had finished med school, now a trauma surgeon, doing his residency. And when he saw my face, bloated, bruised, half of it unrecognizable, something clicked. He ran my fingerprints, matched my blood type, did some doctor-level sleuthing. He figured out it was me, and he stayed. "Why?" I asked him once, during week 2 of recovery. He shrugged, not looking up from the clipboard. Because someone had to. But that wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth came later, in fragments, like the way he'd sit with me long after his shift ended, the gentle way he adjusted my pillow, the time he brushed a piece of hair from my forehead when he thought I was asleep. I noticed. Even with a fractured skull and 2 broken ribs, I noticed. And that's when I realized something had changed in him. Or maybe something had always been there that neither of us understood. By month 2, I was well enough to sit up, talk, joke, ask the hard questions. We sat in the hospital cafeteria, me in a wheelchair, him in scrubs. "So," I asked, "when did you stop hating me?" He choked a little on his coffee. "I didn't hate you. Dude, you glared at me for 4 years straight." He gave a sheepish grin. "Okay, maybe I Didn't know what to do with you. That's one way to put it. Silence. Then, carefully, he said, "You were always so, you. Loud and proud and fearless. I was jealous." That hit me. Harder than the crash, maybe. "I wasn't fearless," I said. "I was terrified. But pretending felt better than hiding." He nodded, slowly, and then he said something I'll never forget. "I spent most of college trying not to look at you." I blinked. "What?" "I noticed everything about you," he said, eyes suddenly vulnerable. "How you moved, how your voice sounded when you read something real. You were impossible to ignore." The air between us changed. We didn't kiss that day. We didn't kiss for a long time. But something began. Something neither of us had the language for yet. He started driving me to physical therapy, then bringing takeout to my apartment, then staying the night. Not like that, not yet, but just being there. Reading, laughing, existing beside me. And slowly, painfully, I realized I was falling for the guy who used to roll his eyes at my poetry. Except now, he was listening. You'd think the weirdest part would have been learning to walk again, or managing the chronic pain, the nightmares, the flashes of twisted metal in my sleep. But no, the weirdest part was relearning how to be close to someone. Not just physically, intimately, emotionally. And that someone, being him. I remember the first time he touched me like he meant it. Not clinically, not casually. It was almost nothing, a hand on my knee while we sat watching some dumb movie on my couch. I don't even remember the title, but I remember him, his fingers slightly trembling, the warmth, how he looked away the second I glanced down at his hand, and I just said, "It's okay." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw fear. Not the fear of being caught. He was out now, technically, had come out during med school, dated a guy briefly in Boston, but nothing serious. This was a different kind of fear. The fear of mattering, of this becoming real, because it was real. We kissed for the first time 3 weeks later. He brought over fur on a rainy night. I'd had a rough PT session that morning, lots of pain, lots of old triggers. I was in a mood. He could tell. He didn't try to fix it, didn't go full doctor mode. He just sat beside me, quietly eating noodles and letting the silence breathe. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the way he held my gaze, or maybe I just needed to know if what we were building had a body to match the soul of it. So I leaned in, and he didn't pull away. The kiss was soft, gentle, terrified and electric, and then, like an idiot, I whispered, "So, do you still hate me?" He laughed, actually laughed, then pulled me in again, kissing me deeper this time. "I never hated you," he said into my mouth. Liar. But I let it go. Dating Chase was surreal, sweet, also wildly confusing. We were opposites in every way. He liked plans, protein bars, minimalist furniture. I liked chaos, carbs and books stacked on every surface. He'd fall asleep at 10 p.m. sharp, curled up on my couch like a cat in Scrubs. I'd stay up till 2, rereading queer literature and writing journal entries I'd never show anyone. But we made space for each other. He started reading the poems I'd written in college, even the cringy ones, especially the ones about him, which, yeah, there were a few. And I started asking him about his family, his past, the pressure he'd grown up with, the masculinity he felt trapped inside for so long, the way he envied people who didn't have to think twice about how to exist. We made a life in those conversations, something slow, quiet, earned. He moved in 6 months later, not because we had to, but because he kept leaving socks in my drawers and one day just didn't go home. The proposal wasn't dramatic, no skywriting or flash mobs. It happened on a Wednesday. I'd had a follow-up scan that morning, one of those routine but still terrifying ones. He came with me, held my hand the entire time, then took me to the waterfront for lunch after. We sat by the river. It was cold, and he draped his jacket over my shoulders without asking. I remember thinking how weirdly right that felt. Then he just said, "I want to keep doing this, for a long..." I looked at him confused. "Lunch?" He smiled. "Life." And before I could ask what he meant, He pulled out a ring. Simple, silver, nothing flashy. "I know this isn't how these things usually go," he said, "but I don't want to wait. Not anymore. I almost lost you before I ever had the guts to love you, and I don't want to waste another second." I stared at the ring, at him, at the man who used to mock me in class for using metaphors too much. And I said, "This better not be a pity proposal." He laughed. "It's not, but if you say no, I'll blame the concussion." So I said yes. Of course I said yes. Our wedding was small. Friends, family, a lot of former trauma nurses. My mom wasn't lucid enough to attend, but we FaceTimed her. She smiled, called him the doctor who fixed my boy. I cried. So did he. We danced to Simply the Best, because we're gay and dramatic, and because Schitt's Creek meant everything to us during lockdown. There was no garter toss, no best man speech, just two people who somehow found each other at the edge of disaster and decided to build something whole from the wreckage. Sometimes people ask how we made it work, how someone who used to glare at me in lit class ended up becoming my husband. And the truth is, people change. Not always, not easily, but they do. Sometimes the boy who once resented your fire is just a boy who didn't know how to hold his own yet. Sometimes hatred is a mask for longing. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the worst day of your life leads you to the love of it. I'm gay. I was in a coma, and now I'm married to the guy who used to hate me in college. Life's funny like that. Marriage didn't magically erase the past. It didn't wave away the resentment or the old emotional bruises we both carried from college. If anything, being married to Chase, really being married to him, forced both of us to reckon with things we'd avoided for years, like the time he admitted he used to pray quietly that he wasn't gay, or how I confessed that I had written angry poems about him for months after graduation. One of them was called Golden Boy Rotting. Yeah, dramatic. I know. But the thing about healing is, it's rarely pretty, it's raw, messy. It shows up in the way you learn not to flinch when your partner raises their voice, not because they mean to scare you, but because old trauma whispers otherwise. It's in the way Chase started sitting with me when I journaled, never asking to read it, just being there, just letting me be ugly and complicated and honest. And how I learned to stop making jokes every time something got real, to stop pushing away affection with sarcasm, to let his love in, even when my brain told me it was temporary. Conditional. Something I'd have to pay for later. We fought. Of course we did. He slammed a mug down on the counter and snapped, "You think I don't know that? You think I don't replay every shitty thing I said to you in college every time I look at you? I'm not trying to fix you. I'm trying to prove I'm not the guy who broke you." That shut me up. Because here's the thing about Chase. He never apologizes with flowers or gifts or elaborate speeches. He apologizes with action. The next day, he went out and bought an old, dog-eared copy of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, a book we'd once argued about in school, and scribbled in the margins. Every note, every underline was a message to me. This line made me think of your voice. This metaphor reminds me of how you looked at me when I didn't deserve it. This is what I wish I'd understood about you back then. I read it in one sitting. We cried together that night, a good cry, one of those purging, bone-deep sobs where you feel like a different person afterward. That's how we learned to love each other, by telling the truth even when it hurt, especially then. There are still days I wake up disoriented. I'll roll over, feel the scar on my ribs, and for a second, I'm back in the hospital, back in the dark. But then I'll hear him humming in the kitchen, smell his coffee, feel his arms wrap around me from behind, and he'll whisper something like, "You're safe." And it's not just comfort, it's anchor. It's you survived, and you're not alone anymore. Sometimes I ask him if he ever regrets it, falling for me after everything, after the damage. He always gives me the same look, half annoyed, half incredulous. "You think I didn't fall in love with that part too?" he says. You think I'd want you without your scars. He doesn't mean just the physical ones. He means the years I spent building armor just to breathe in public. He means the way I shut down when someone uses the wrong tone. The way I need reassurance in triplicate. He loves me not in spite of those things. He loves me through them. And in return, I love him even when he forgets to call back, even when he's too quiet and I have to pull his thoughts out one by one, even when he gets stuck in that place of perfectionism and tries to do everything alone. Because that's what love is, right? Not finding someone flawless, but choosing someone, again and again, when they're tired, wounded, scared, and still trying. A few weeks ago, I found a box of college stuff in our storage unit. Old notebooks, photos, a flyer for an LGBTQ+ open mic I had organized. My name was printed in huge rainbow letters. Below it, someone had written in red pen, "Try less hard." I stared at it for a long time. When Chase got home, I showed it to him. He looked at it, quiet for a moment, then said, "That was me." I blinked. "You wrote that?" He nodded. I was an asshole. I wanted to get mad. Instead, I asked, "Why?" He sat down beside me, took a deep breath. "Because you were everything I was scared of being. Loud, visible, unapologetic. And I hated you because I hated myself. I hated that I wanted what you had, that I saw you and felt seen in ways I didn't want to be." We didn't say anything for a while. Then I pulled him into a hug and whispered, "You don't have to be scared anymore. Neither do I." It's strange, looking back. The crash, the coma, the second chance. All of it feels like a different lifetime. But I think that's what love does. It folds time. It makes the impossible feel inevitable. It turns enemies into husbands and trauma into transformation. I'm not saying it was easy, but it was worth it. Every painful inch of it. I used to wonder what kind of man I would have become if the accident hadn't happened. If I'd just driven through that intersection without incident. If Chase had stayed a memory I occasionally cursed during late-night wine-fueled rants to friends. But now, I don't ask those questions anymore. Because the life I'm living now, the marriage we've built, the love we fight for every day, it's not a consolation prize. It's the real thing. That doesn't mean I don't carry grief. I do. The version of myself that had to be broken open to let this love in, he deserves to be mourned. So does the time we lost. I sometimes catch Chase watching me when he thinks I'm not looking, especially when I'm laughing or dancing around the kitchen or doing something ridiculous like singing Robin at full volume while folding laundry. And there's this look on his face, like he's memorizing me. He once said, "You almost died before I got the chance to love you. I'm not wasting any more of it." That's the thing about near-death experiences. They reorder everything, permanently. Before the crash, I thought love had to look a certain way. Be smooth, aesthetic, Instagrammable. I thought the right person would show up fully formed, emotionally literate, fluent in gay longing, and preferably with a playlist that matched mine. But love, real love, isn't curated. It's messy. Sometimes love smells like antiseptic and cafeteria coffee and old grief you thought you buried. Sometimes it looks like the guy who made you feel invisible in college, now crying at your bedside, whispering apologies you can't even hear because you're in a coma. Sometimes it's the hand you didn't know you needed, holding yours while you relearn how to walk. And sometimes it's sitting across from that person years later, over breakfast, and realizing you wouldn't change a damn thing. There was one night, not long ago, when I woke up drenched in sweat. My chest was heaving, the old dream playing on loop, the tires, the metal, the silence. Chase woke instantly, didn't say a word, just wrapped his arms around me, pressed his forehead to mine, and held on until I came. And when I did, when the fog cleared and I could finally speak, I whispered, "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened, that we'd met some other way?" He thought about it. "I used to," he said. "I used to wish I'd been brave earlier. that I'd kissed you in college instead of mocking your scarf. I laughed through my tears. It was a good scarf. It was objectively awful, he grinned, but I was an idiot. Then he got quiet, kissed the top of my head. But no, he said. Now, I don't wish it had gone differently, because I don't know that I would have found you without losing something first. I nodded, and in the silence that followed, I felt it again, that impossible thing we'd built out of bone and ash and old resentment. That love that started with hate and survived something no one thought I would. A love I wouldn't trade for anything. We keep the scar visible now. It runs down my left side, rib to hip, a jagged reminder. I used to cover it, ashamed, afraid of what it said about me, that I was broken, fragile, damaged. But Chase, he kissed it the first time we made love, traced it with his fingers like it was a sacred map. This, he said, is where you became. And he was right, because before that scar, I was surviving, posturing, wearing my queerness like armor, but never really letting anyone in far enough to see the soft center. But now I'm loved, fully, flawed and furious and funny and occasionally petty and loved. Some days we still bicker about dishes, about how he folds towels like a psychopath, about how I refuse to buy matching socks. We're not perfect. We're not trying to be. We're just two men who spent years getting it wrong, getting each other wrong, and then somehow, miraculously, found our way back. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but if you're listening, really listening, let me tell you this. Love can start from pain, from misunderstanding, from fear, and still become something whole, something holy, something worth waking up for. There's a picture on our nightstand now, me in a hospital bed, pale, wired up, barely recognizable. And next to me, slouched in a chair, is Chase. He's asleep, head tilted toward me, a look of absolute exhaustion on his face. But even unconscious, he's leaning toward me. That photo was taken by a nurse who said, "You'll want this later." And she was right, because it's not a photo of tragedy. It's a photo of devotion. The beginning of a redemption arc I didn't know either of us needed. I'm gay. I was in a coma, and now I'm married to the man who hated me in college and loved me back to life.